In this lesson, we will combine some of our previously learned skills to build a bank of clocks for the interface. Okay, so I want to create about 4 clocks that are all going to be just kind of side by side in a row so that the interface will kind of look like it's monitoring a few different time zones all at once. So I'm just going to grab that ellipse tool from up here, hold shift while I drag to make a perfectly round circle. Then we can toggle that just so that we have that stroke instead of the fill. And I'm just going to create an outline for the clock. So we'll go ahead and bump that up there, get that to a reasonable width for how large that is. And I'm also going to go ahead and switch this to outlines. So go up there to Object, go to Path, and choose Outline Stroke. So now we have this fill instead of a stroke. And instead of creating all 4 of the clocks at once, I'm just going to create this first clock, and then we'll go ahead and add the other ones later once we get this one set up the way we want it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my type tool, and let's type out our first number, which would be the number at the top of the clock, so 12. And this is going to be an analog clock, so I'm just going to go ahead and use these numbers just kind of like you would expect to see. And let's change this stance of our font to regular, maybe medium. I think that looks pretty good right there. And we can make this a little bit smaller if you want to, if you feel like that's too large, and maybe bring that together just a little bit more, tighten that up a bit. And then just with those settings that we've already created, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate those numbers for the 3, 6, and 9. So I'm just going to drag those into place. I'll go ahead and Alt drag just like that. And I'm not too worried about the placement right now because I'm going to be using my Align panel to help me get this looking perfect. So I'll go ahead and select those 3 numbers, or excuse me, 2 numbers and the circle. So just kind of drawing a box right through the middle there, we'll come over here to the Align panel and go ahead and do a horizontal align center. And then let's do the same thing for these 2 numbers, but not for the circle. So just hit horizontal align center, or excuse me, vertical align center. And this one looks like it's maybe a little bit too close to the edge. So we'll go ahead and fix that. So that looks pretty good right there. Now let's go ahead and fix these numbers. So this is going to be our 3, and this one will be our 6, and this one will be our 9. Now they're a little bit off just because of the way that that spacing works with that particular font. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of fix that, just make that feel like it makes a little more sense, and maybe align this one again, just like that. So once you're happy with the distribution of those numbers, you can go ahead and select all 4 of them, hit Control G, and then we'll select our circle as well, and go ahead and do a horizontal and vertical distribution. Now, one of the interesting things that you'll notice that happens whenever we do this is that because of the baseline of this font, we're getting kind of a weird distribution. So there's too little space up here by the 12 and too much under the 6. So it's always better to optically center something or align something if you can tell that the mathematical way that it's trying to be done, it doesn't look quite right. So I'm just going to arrow that back down in there. And then let's go ahead and ungroup those. It's because now I might need to adjust them just a little bit further, but we have a really good idea of where this clock is going. And I want to go ahead and add in some of my other characters. So we'll go ahead and put our 1, and I'm just going to duplicate this 1 all the way around, and then we'll change it as we need to. So we'll just Alt drag for the rest of the numbers and change those as we need to change them. So I'm just kind of coming in here, highlighting those and changing them as I go. Might get a little bit tight up here. We'll probably want to change the tracking of this, or the kerning of that 11. So just kind of squeeze that down a little bit, make that a little bit tighter since we've got a couple of 1s there. And we can do the same thing for our 10 just highlight that, and I'm holding shift just to make that go a little bit faster. Okay, so once you're happy with the way that that looks, maybe our 12 could use a little bit more as well. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of put these back into place now that we've kind of adjusted those. And I'll do the same thing for the characters on this side. And that one needs to come down a little bit just to fit in that slot better. Maybe move this one over. The 7 is a little too close to the frame, so I'm just going in here and working out the tension so that that doesn't feel like it's so close to that outer edge. And these numbers all feel a little bit too big for this clock right now, so I'm going to go ahead and select the whole thing, select the just the numbers now, so I deselected that outside. And if I scale down, you'll see that those numbers just kind of all come to the middle, and they really look the same distance apart from each other as relative to that scale. So I'm going to undo that, and if I just come in here and change the size of the font, you can see that that's a lot better way to change this as far as just making it feel like it fits in that space a little bit better. But we might have to come in here, and again, just because of the way that this font is set up, we have to kind of move those numbers back around just to make them fit a little bit better, just because that this spot right here to the left of the letters is where that is changing whenever we move that scale around. So now what I want to do is do some vertical distribution. So this 2 looks like it's a little higher than the 10, so we can come over here and click that just to kind of put those as they should be if anything gets moved around. So I want the 8 and the 4 to be on the same baseline because they're right across from each other. So you can see how that kind of helps to fix the placement. Now, it doesn't matter so much where this is on the left and right, just as long as there's a reasonable amount of space between that edge and the number. But I do want to make sure that they're on that same baseline. So I'm just going to go through and run that alignment for all those numbers that are right across from each other like that. So this looks a lot better now than what we had earlier. And I think I want to come in here and maybe change the font from black to white. So we'll come over here to our swatches, choose white, make sure you're doing it for the fill and not the stroke. And now let's create a little shape to go in the middle here that'll kind of act as the anchor for everything else. And if you're happy with the way those numbers look, let's just go ahead and select the whole thing and hit Control G to create a group so that can be moved together and we don't accidentally move anything out of place if you're happy with the way that looks. So I'll go ahead and grab my ellipse tool. We'll just draw an ellipse right there in the center. Just holding Shift and Alt will be able to allow you to draw that perfectly in the center. We can select the whole thing again and grab our Align panel and just do a horizontal and vertical distribution to make sure that circle is right in the middle. And now I want to add a gradient to this to kind of make it look like it's shiny metal. So we can just come over here, click the gradient tool or the gradient panel. And then with that selected, I'll just click that gradient and let's go ahead, choose radial. And right now it's applying that gradient to the stroke. So let's flip that and turn off that outside stroke and bring the fill to the front. So now we're just going to be messing with this small circle, just this inside part of it, just the fill. So if you don't like the way that radial looks, you could maybe change it back to linear, see what you think looks best. I like the way that radial looks for this, but I'm going to go ahead and switch these so that the black is in the center and the white is on the outside. And then I can come over here and grab the gradient tool and start to play around with the way that that distribution is happening. So if I maybe want to get right in the middle, then pull that out maybe a little bit further, just so the white is kind of just very small on those edges there, just kind of like that. Now, if you want this to really have a feeling like it's actually metal, I want to actually duplicate this, and then we're going to squeeze the one on top down a little bit. So I'm going to squeeze it like just kind of like this towards the center, but I want to first have something underneath it. So I'm going to undo that, and we'll just hit Control C, Control Shift V to copy and paste that in place. And now with the one on top selected and holding Alt, I'm just going to squeeze that in so we kind of get this sort of a little button there. So when I zoom back out, you can see how that looks and really how that blends together and gives this kind of an interesting, just a unique feel for that button that you have there right in the middle, just to kind of give everything an anchor point, and that's where the hands will move from. So let's go ahead and create our hands. You might want to just select this little point here in the middle and hit Control G to group those together. So we've got just these two shapes now kind of separate from each other. And I'm going to create my handles using the shape tool. I'm going to start out with the star tool. So go ahead and grab that star and just start dragging that out. And then I'll hit the down arrow key, and that's going to take away the number of points that I have and give me a triangle. So I'll start with a triangle. I'm holding Shift now just so I can't spin that around. It's just going to snap that into place. And we'll just create this however long we want that first handle to be. So I'll start right there. And let's make this that blue color that we've been working with for our fill. And now I'm just going to come over here on the edge of it, hold Alt, and squeeze that in to make it a straight little line there. So now we've got something that looks kind of like that. And now I want to make a similar hand that we can use for the hour hand. Maybe this will make a good minute hand since it's pretty long. So we'll make a shorter one for our hour hand. So I'm just going to duplicate this by Alt dragging that straight over there. And then we can make it just a little bit shorter and possibly maybe change the color just slightly. So we could use that same kind of darker bluish color that we used whenever we were working on this part of the outside of this ring. So we can just grab that eyedropper tool and eyedrop that, and that's going to give us that color. So now I can turn this over, and I definitely want to make sure that it's not too dark so that it, whenever this interacts with our background, we are still able to see this. So if I come up here and test it out, it looks like that might be just a bit dark for how small this piece is. So maybe come in there, double click that color and just bump that up a little bit. Now I don't want to take it all the way up to this same level that this blue has, so just going about halfway. And that looks a little bit better. Whenever they overlap, you'll still be able to tell a difference, but it's not going to be so much that it feels like it's exactly the same. Now I want to go ahead and send those to the back, so I'm just going to select both and hit Control Shift open bracket to send those all the way backwards. And now we have our first clock, and it looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way that that feels. So I want to go ahead and create the other 3 clocks. So for now, I'll just select everything, hit Control G, and then I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just hit the arrow key for however many I want to create. And I'm just going to kind of pull them out to the side here. So I'm going to push the right arrow key so that they're duplicated in that direction. So we'll hit Alt, and I'm going to hit arrow over 1, 2, 3 times. And then we'll just grab that top one, holding Shift, and drag that over to the side. And now let's just select all of them, and we'll use our align panel to redistribute those. So just come down here, choose horizontal distribute left. And now I have a nice little bank of clocks, but they're a little bit too close together still. So I'm going to scoot this one over just a bit, holding Shift to make sure that that moves in a perfectly straight line. We'll select all of them again and redistribute that. Now, I think that this looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the way that this feels. The numbers might be a little bit heavy. Maybe we should have stuck with regular. If I want to go in there and change that, I can actually just double click that group and then come in here to my character panel, and when I'm in isolation mode, it's just easy for me to really quickly change that. So I could do that for all of those really quickly if I want to make those changes. So it makes it easy for me to be able to change things just depending on how I created that originally. So I'm going to step back here to this group, just select that, and we'll change this back to regular. And I'm going to do this for my other 2 clocks. Maybe makes it just a little bit easier for you to change later on if you have everything grouped, because then you don't have to go in and change every single number individually. Whoops, we're going to change that to regular so it matches all the rest. And now, one last thing I would like to do is change the blending mode of the actual clock itself. So this outside part. Now, if I just go ahead and select those, it's going to select everything. So I'm going to have to ungroup, because if I try to change the blending mode as it is right now, it's not going to change at all. It's just going to look the same, and that's because it's grouped. So I'll go ahead and change that back to normal, and we'll ungroup this. And we're going to have to ungroup them all individually so that we can just select the outside by itself. And we'll select all 4 of those, and let's try overlay, just see what that looks like. So we kind of get a nice look here with the way that those are overlaying, and you can test out different blending modes to see what you think looks best for your type that you're trying to create. That's probably a little bit too red. Multiply is going to be pretty red as well. So overlay, I think, looks really nice. Sometimes you can get it to look a little bit more yellow whenever you're using an orange color like this. Definitely don't want to do something that's going to give you green. So maybe just play around with the different blending modes until you find the one that you like the best. And then I'll just go ahead and select all of those and hit Control G to group everything back together again. So now I can move this all around as one piece. So pretty easy. If you wanted to maybe do anything else with this, maybe you go in there and rotate those hands around so it's obvious that they're at different positions in time. So the different time zones are going to have different time displayed on the clock. So that would be an easy thing for you to go in there and change if you wanted to. But definitely I would say maybe don't select that middle part just so that the reflection remains the same. So if I wanted to do that, I could just zoom in here and hit Shift just so that I only have those hands selected. Maybe grab that rotation tool, make sure that you move the anchor point right to the middle of the clock so it's rotating from that center. And then you can just rotate those hands around and display a different time. And you probably would want to go in there and do that for multiple times on your clocks, but we don't have to do all of those right here, right now. So in this lesson, we use some quick duplication techniques to speed up our workflow for creating our clocks.